Hello, and welcome to the Evidence-Based Poll Podcast with me, your host, Dr. Rosy Boa, or just Rosy's fine. But today we're going to talk about something that I've been thinking about a lot. I mean, it's early January when I'm recording this. Classic setting resolutions time. And I think a lot, especially this time of year, about habits and routines and patterns and also goals and how those two things intersect. And today I want to talk a little bit about some of the research around that and some ways to think about them and some, of course, tips and tricks for how to do gooder in, whatever time span you're listening to this in. And if you are listening to this right when it comes out, I'm having a free event on the private group I run for the studio, the 5-day evidence-based poll reset. And we're going to work on bringing in some science-backed techniques to help figure out, what it is you really want from your poll practice this year, how to get it in a way that's actually likely and reasonable and sustainable and is going to fit with your actual life that you actually have and not the dream life you're imagining when you're setting your goals. We're going to move together. It should be a fun time. Like I said, completely free. I have the sign up link in the bio down there. So definitely check that out if you are at all interested. But regardless, let's get into it. Habits and goals. These are two separate things. They've been studied a fair amount, particularly in the positive psychology literature. Also a lot of stuff in education, particularly around goal setting. And you've probably, I don't know, if you had kind of a similar educational background that I did in grade school, you probably learned about SMART goals or maybe EEE goals or, anything like that about goal setting. So definitely something that I have, encountered before. And also I think there's been more discussion of habits from the general popular science. Atomic Habits is the book that I see people chatting about a lot, which discusses habits quite a bit, obviously. But they're not the same thing, and the relationships to each other aren't necessarily opaque from the outset. I've got some citations down there, as always. Some of the work I'll be talking about today. I will say for habits and health and exercise in particular, a lot of those studies are looking specifically at weight loss. So just know about it if you're going into the literature that's something you're going to run across. One of these days, I'm going to do an episode on some of the research about why trying to intentionally lose weight is not great for you and kind of doesn't work. But it is such a huge body of literature that I just kind of get overwhelmed. So at some point I'll do a series of episodes on them, but not yet. We do have one with fat liberation is in the title, where we talked with a dietitian about it, sort of more conversationally. So you can check that out if you're interested. But let's start talking about habits. So habits are behaviors that are repetitive and that happen based on a cue. So something triggers it for you to do it. And also that happen pretty much automatically, right? So you don't really have to think about it. So a good example of a habit is that you get in the car, you put on your seatbelt. Or for example, for me, I always wash my face in the shower. So I get in the shower, wash my body, and then I know it's my time to wash my face. And I don't have to think about it. I don't have to, intentionally be sit down and write down all the things I need to do in the shower. I just I'm in that situation. I have that cue. I'm finished washing my body, and then I wash my face. There is some evidence, so particularly this is cited in Neal 2007, that a lot of our behavior is actually habitual. So they cited some earlier work looking at a diary, self-reported study, and they suggested that 35% of the behavior that they observed was in fact habitual, which is a pretty big chunk. So the suggestion from that body of research is that much of what we do is habitual, is routine, is triggered based on this sort of outside cue. Sometimes you'll hear, patterns of behavior like this referred to as systems or structures. I think that's more informal. I haven't seen that as often in the research. And the, pros and cons to habit formation particularly. Pro, once you do it, it's pretty sticky, right? It sticks around. I automatically just put my seatbelt on when I go in the car because I built that habit when I was really young, and now I don't even have to think about it. It just happens. So it doesn't take a lot of effort. It's really consistent, which is great. That's what we want when we're building physical activity. Some downsides, it's really hard to form a habit. It takes a lot of repetition and it takes a really specific and good choice of cue because that cue is brittle, right? If you do X, win Y, and you don't do X for whatever reason, Y will never happen. So a great example that is relevant for me is that we just had a big winter storm and we lost water, so I didn't shower. So I didn't wash my face because I always wash my face in my shower. So I didn't even think about it, right? It was just part of that routine. At the start of the routine didn't happen, so nothing else that was linked with it happened as well. So if you're thinking about starting a habit, it's going to require a lot of time, and it's going to require very specific selection of cue. So something that works really well for the specific behavior that you are targeting. And I think something that can be particularly helpful there in our pole practice is as a way to add things or not to add things, as the case may be, during our practice itself. So for example, if you know, oh, I really want to start wearing shoes more, right, in my pole practice. Maybe if you put on grip right after you're done warming up, and when you start to get on the pole, if you put your shoes right by your grip, then when you go to get your grip, you can be like, all right, that's my shoes. I was going to wear those, and then put them on, right? So a way to link those two things, something you already always doing, assuming you always put on grip, and with something else that you want to happen, putting on shoes, and then arranging things so that it's very easy and natural for that to happen. In terms of cues to develop the habit of going to pole at all, it can be a little bit more challenging because I think a lot of natural routine cues happen on sort of a daily cycle, and I don't recommend polling every day. In fact, I strenuously recommend you don't exercise every day and that you have built-in rest days. Your body needs time to recuperate and recover. I hope that's common knowledge at this point. I've got a podcast episode on rest and like why it's important. I think it's called The Science of Rest that I recommend. If you're like, I've never heard that before, definitely dig into that. But some ways that I've used cues to help me build a more consistent pole practice is I am a big calendar person. So a great cue for me is I look at my calendar and something's on my calendar and then I do it. And every Sunday when I go through and I do my calendar blocking for the week, I have a to-do that, oh, I need to schedule in a specific number of pole classes, right? Just so that I'm continuing to work on technical stuff and growing technically and actually showing up and doing the dang thing, right? Because you get busy, and especially, y'all know, you got a home pole, you could do it anytime. So you gotta pick some time that you will do it. And if like me, you're a big calendar girly or into calendars regardless of your gender, it makes a lot of sense to have that be the trigger that sets up the behavior, and then the behavior sort of like happens itself. I would say that then the scheduling of classes would be the habit rather than the going to classes, because that's a little bit more, variable when that happens. So that's habits. One thing that can help us decide which habits we want to continue, or maybe which habits we want to break, perhaps by modifying our cues in some way, is our goals. So goals are not automatic. They are conscious decisions that we make about things that we want to do, or things that we want to happen, or things that we want to stop doing or stop having happen in our lives. Generally, they arise from values, right? From desires, things that you think are important or special or good or bad, whatever those may be. And generally they're linked to something longer term. And there's a lot of different types of goals. You may have heard about the 3 Ps. And I think the type of goal where forming a habit is the best way to achieve it are things like process goals. So these are where this would be a goal like I want to journal every night, right? I want to stretch 3 times a week, something like that. If you have a goal like that, then setting up a habit where you have a cue that triggers it can be really, really powerful. So a good example is, I do journal every night. I'm a journaler, and I have my journal set up right in the space that I am before I go to bed. So when I settle down in the evening to sort of like calm down, I'm like, oh, there's my journal, time to journal, right? So I put it in the space where I am at the time when I'm doing the thing, and that's the cue that triggers the habit. So if we have a specific goal that we're looking to work towards, that we need to do consistent small motion towards, creating a habit to do that can be a really effective way. But they're not quite the same thing, right? And I think one of the big differences is that habits are unconscious and goals are conscious. And a lot of our habits can just sort of occur without us necessarily intentionally creating it, right? So if you're like, okay, every time after I have dinner, I open my phone to check my email, and then that cue means that I'm on Instagram for an hour watching poll videos. Listen, we've all been there. Well, I've been there. Maybe you have as well. And you'd have to, change that cue in some way if you wanted to stop that behavior. But it's a repetitive behavior, right? The cue happens a lot, and so the habit happens a lot, even if it's not necessarily something that you want to have happen. So that's sort of the main difference. And if you have a goal that would be supported by forming a habit, then intentionally working towards forming a habit can be a really powerful tool there. So some just general tips for working towards habit formation. I talked about sort of habits more on a broader scale, right? So like when I schedule my pole classes and my pole time and my personal pole time, and I do schedule my personal pole time as well. So just like I have playtime on my calendar, and because things are on my calendar, they happen. And then also within your pole practice. And you could also link them to other things, especially other things that are fun and pleasurable. So a great example of this is, again, I'm just pulling a lot of examples from my own life here. Something that I really enjoy listening to is podcasts, and I also like to have a clean house. So I will listen to fun podcasts that I really enjoy while I'm cleaning. And that helps me build a reward for the task, right? And some tasks are inherently pleasurable or inherently rewarding or intrinsically motivating, or may lead to intrinsic motivation from you. Hopefully pole is one of those things, but some things may be a little bit less fun, right? So maybe, you know, the conditioning part, you're like, a little bit less fun for me. I don't necessarily want to do that, right? Maybe the stretching, maybe your cross training, maybe it's just not quite as fun and rewarding as learning new pole tricks for you. So anything you can do to sort of get a little bit more dopamine, make them a little bit more fun, can really, really help. So layering them with other things, right? So for conditioning, maybe really fun music, motivating music, stuff with a strong beat and stuff that you like listening to. Maybe you have like a playlist of favorite songs you only listen to while you're conditioning, so it's a little extra treat. Maybe you give yourself a reward for having done it consistently. So one of my things that I've been working on recently is I've actually started writing fiction again, which is something that I used to do. Like I used to be a big fiction writer when I was much younger, and then I burned out in grad school and had a much less close relationship to fiction reading and writing, which is only now starting to heal many years later. But I have a goal for myself that I do it 3 times a week. And so when I do my journaling in the evening, I mark whether or not that day I did my fiction writing. And I am the person for whom I have filled out a chart and it looks pretty, is intrinsically rewarding, right? Like I like seeing the number of tick marks and being like, yes, I did it. Good job. Like that gives me my little burst of dopamine. But if I weren't that type of person, then perhaps I would tie it to a reward, right? So, oh, I've accomplished this goal. Maybe I get a book from a used bookstore, right? Or something that I would find enjoyable and pleasurable. Also, taking time to reflect on how well you've done, right? So if you're like, hey, I have this habit I'm working towards, how am I doing? And celebrating when you actually do it. I think a trap that a lot of us fall into, especially pole dancers, I don't know what it is about us and perfectionism. Maybe it's because you have to want things really badly and have like a really strong idea of how you want things to be to pole dance for fun because it hurts. But especially with pole dancers, I know a lot of us are perfectionists, that idea that it doesn't count if I don't do it all the time, right? So I'm aiming for 3 times a week for fiction writing, but even then, if I only do one little section of writing a week, that's still way more than I was doing, right? So I'm still making progress, and even if I skip 3 weeks entirely, but I come back on week 4 and I get 1 session in, that's more than I was doing, right? I'm moving towards the goal that I have just to do it more often, even if I'm not doing it perfectly. So reflecting, am I doing the thing, right? How can I do a better job? And then also, being nice to yourself, allowing yourself to have, squishiness, right? I'm not your boss. Hopefully you're not treating yourself like your boss, right? You're not trying to extract value from yourself. You're trying to make your life better and live it more in alignment with your goals and the things that are fun and enjoyable and important and valuable to you. So noticing when you do it and celebrating when you do it, and also really enjoying it as much as possible and having that positive feeling within yourself. You got to give yourself the reward for doing the thing you're trying to do. Otherwise, you're going to want to stop doing it, right? Which I think is a part of the reason why a lot of us, we make big, lofty goals for ourselves in January, and then we don't end up keeping up with them for a number of reasons. But I think one of them is that we don't make it fun, right? We're like, I want to run a marathon, and instead of, hey, I want to, go running 2 times a week, and if I run 3 times in a month, I get a special gel pouch. I don't know. I'm not a runner. I don't know what like a good reward would be, but like something that would work for you, right? And something where you recognize the progress, even if it's not perfect, right? And then of course, I think it can also be helpful to bring in other types of motivation as well, but I have a different podcast episode on that. And I'll link that in the description as well, the how to stay motivated as a home puller. And one of the big things from that podcast episode is don't try to do things alone, right? Try to bring other people in for accountability, for companionship. It'll make you more consistent. I think this is based on the research, and check the citations in that description, but it'll make you more consistent. You'll have more fun. If you're aiming for intensity, it will help you to increase the intensity of your physical workout. So all around, good thing. Don't try to do it alone. Try to have some friends involved. And one of the ways that you can meet some friends is by joining the challenge. Segue? Well, it's not a challenge, it's a reset, right? So just a way to like check in, figure out, or at least spend some time thinking about what it is that you really, really want in your pole practice, and then how you're gonna get there. And we're gonna do it together, and you'll get lots of support, and it should be a really good time. So I would love to see you there. And if not, I hope you have a wonderful beginning of the year. I hope your 2025 is off to a great start, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye.